Hey there. So, as you might know by now, CarX Street PC is out after the mobile version was announced in 2021, and there's some big boots to fill after some of the other games CarX Technologies is released, seeing as CarX Drift Racing, their flagship title, has cemented itself as one of the major car sim games of our time. After getting to play CarX Street for a while, I think I've come to a pretty solid conclusion on where this game stands. To give you a more or less brief history of what the brand has done over the years, let's start with their first release and work our way up. Then, I'll show you what I think they did wrong and what I think they did right. Keep up, because this one's a doozy. Alright, so the first title CarX Technologies would release would be CarX Drift Racing in 2014, a relatively simple and free-to-play mobile game that served as a pretty realistic yet fun representation of what drifting and racing feels like for mobile users on both Apple and Android systems. For the time, I don't really remember a more well-made and realistic-ish game being out apart from this and maybe Real Racing 3. 3 years later, the PC counterpart to CarX Drift Racing would be released, getting developer support even up to now. Within the same year, CarX Technologies would also release a highway racing title, which would be available on Android, iOS, and Nintendo Switch, surprisingly. In 2018, CarX Drift Racing 2 would be released for mobile, which was essentially an attempt to bring the customization and larger amount of maps and cars from the earlier PC title onto the format of a mobile game. At this point, CarX Drift Racing for the PC had become the flagship title, and the games that didn't fall under the Drift Racing name would essentially just be side projects. In 2020, another side project would be released, named CarX Rally, serving as a rally simulation game for mobile platforms. Finally, in 2021, CarX Street would get announced, although unfortunately, it would take almost a year for it to be released on mobile due to several delays. So finally, we arrive at the release date of CarX Street PC. August 29th of 2024. So now that you have some history about the titles in general, how do you think this new game performs against CarX's other flagship title? Alright, but before you hear my opinions about what's wrong with the game, let's go through some of the Steam reviews to see what other people think. Oh yeah, and just so you know, I'm gonna go through both positive and negative reviews. I don't want to lean too hard on one side.
Oh my god!
If you're expecting Forza Horizon for £18, then lower your standards. This game has its weird side with the AI voice acting, which there is not a lot of, luckily. But for £18, you get a big map, tons of cars that you can modify, and unlike other games, this game won't shower you with free $1 million cars and ruin your progression. Performance leaves something to wish for, as 1440p ultra settings with a 3070 gets you about 50 to 60 FPS. Don't let other reviews keep you from this game, get it, and if it's not for you, refund it. Not recommended after 2.4 hours of gameplay in the last 2 weeks. Has the bones of a great game hiding in there. Devs chose a cash grab over what could have been an NFS killer. The remnants of microtransactions are plagued throughout. The economy is geared toward buying in-game cash, and you can't buy in-game cash. Simply tuning the car costs cash. Gas costs cash. Tires costs cash. These things themselves aren't bad, as they could have easily made this work as an immersive element to the game. However, it was simply to milk cash from the mobile game, which has been ripped out. You can only do crew races once for money. There's also elite races that you have to wait an hour to redo. You'll either love or hate the physics. The traffic AI is completely borked, but you can use them to take out the rubber band racer AI that will plow you off the road any chance it gets. The character voice and images being AI is hilarious. For a small indie dev that hasn't made millions for microtransactions, it would be serviceable. For this game, it should have been left out entirely. Overall, it's just an absolute letdown. This guy, who recommends it after 19.9 hours in the last 2 weeks, genuinely had more fun playing this than the last 2 NFS games. A great arcade racer with loads and loads of visual and tuning mods. Some tuning aspects also reflect visually on the car and affect how the car feels. The handling model takes a bit of getting used to, but learning to not lock up under braking and modulate throttle makes the game way more fun. Well worth the price in my opinion. I bought this game the second I saw it released. It didn't even come close to meeting my expectations. The characters' voices are all AI generated and bland. The cars feel incredibly slow. And the driving is horrible, which is kind of the main thing. I've been anticipating this game since it was announced, and was met with nothing but disappointment. To be honest, the beginning of the game is a bit frustrating, but as you progress and learn more, the better it gets. Yes, there are some issues with the AI being concrete walls on rails, and the traffic cars are basically scripted to be in your way. But the truth is, get better, lol. Also, traffic is mostly in the same places on each lap of circuits, so you can plan ahead. As far as the physics go, in my opinion, they are better than Forza Horizon. The cars actually feel unique. Upgrades actually make a drastic difference to how the car handles and drives. This game has a ton of potential. Also, if you truly miss you old school midnight club / the Need for Speed vibes, this game has it. I find myself reliving the same energy I got as a kind of driving through the city of Midnight Club dub edition. The map is beautiful. Races are fun, albeit once you're faster than the AI racers, the features are cool, car selection is awesome, the game has some minor performance issues, but I still run 60 FPS stable like 98% of the time on Ultra with a 3060, R5, 3600, and 32 gigs of RAM. Also, make sure you install an SSD to maximize performance. Good point this guy's making. It runs like crap if you don't. Give the CarX devs time. This has so much potential and is already so good in my opinion. If you don't like it, go back to Forza, leave your negative remarks in your mind and go somewhere else. Legit, constructive criticism is welcome. Negativity is not. It's a waste of a read and a waste of your time for posting. Unless this game is in the same state 2 years from now, then you can complain. It's been out for barely a week. Get your panties out of a bunch. Karen. The game economy should be fixed ASAP. It has potential of ruining the game's legacy. Otherwise, the game is having huge future if some minor tweaks are made, probably the closest thing you can play to Need for Speed Underground in the 2020s. So they fixed some of the economy issues with the update 1.02, but the gold coins are still an issue. You need about 2, oh my god, how many of those? And around 500 to fully update a car, which is way too much. They fixed some of the economy stuff with update 1.03, but they putted the old players in a significant disadvantage, because the game caps at level 50, and there are no more gold coins with who you buy the elite stuff in the game. There's only one solution: remove the gold coins, or add some kind of conversion for the normal cash, like $1,000 to 1 gold coin or something like that. Right now, I'm level 50, and there is no more progression or high-class car building offline. I don't want to stake my cash in online races versus modders. Okay, I think I'm going to cap it off here. Pretty hard to decide. In advance, this is not Need for Speed, the crew, or Forza in any way. Let's begin. Pros: great car selection, many customization options, decent map, active map, a lot to do, car maintenance. Contras: questionable AI, often very different handling within the same car. Handling overall pretty spongy. Brakes are decoration. Whoever brakes loses, I guess. Economy: graphics and optimization. First race in the Porsche, I crashed harder than in my young ages being drunk in some corner. I tried to get used to the physics / handling, no chance. There's also no great feel for speed. It feels slow and after a while pretty boring and repeating. After choosing the first car, it felt even slower. Of course, the pick for me was a slow Miata. I did one race in it, made use of my deluxe cars pack by picking the M39, which is the E39, which made it a little better. Now, you would think, M39, nice drift car with the torque and so on. Yeah, no. After one sprint, I joined in a drift event, and the car was not powerful enough to maintain a full drift. Mid-drift, I went straight again into the wall or into an AI car. Also figured out, using your brake does not help much. The car skids but won't drift. It's like turning without ABS on a full stop. The money you'll earn will disappoint you since you're spoiled by Need for Speed. Also, it comes in with filling up your gas and getting new tires. Upgrades are expensive as well. It takes time, a lot of time, to achieve something meaningful. Traffic and race AI in the race, you get the feeling that the AI is targeting you no matter what. They'll find a way to spin you out or crash the hell out of you. I'm not a man who needs 110% fancy graphics, but it should be in the performance range of looks. Optimization is the key. Gotta love the fact that you have to fill up the car and care about your tires. I'll leave a positive one here. Not for how it is now, but the game got great possibilities to get the game many of us want. I'll hope the developer team will notice the voices of the fans. I'll give the game another try in a year.
So if I'm being completely honest, I could just use the Steam reviews as reference material to shape my opinion on the game, but I decided to get into the game myself to see what I could find in terms of good and bad, and so I'll start with
Good bad.
Alright, so right off the get-go, this game requires you to use an SSD for the game to run decently. I tried to do it without my SSD, and it was miserable. Early game racing and progress is pretty boring, mostly to do with the physics, but also just because of the cars themselves. The cars feel really slow at first and the handling sucks. Obviously, I don't expect the beginner cars to have 500 horsepower and be fully set up or anything. Personally, I picked the green mini truck as my starter car, and you literally can't touch the handbrake if you're using a wheel, because you will spin out. There's no power or torque to keep the car sliding unless you got near top speed, and acceleration is terrible with early game cars. All of the cars feel like they weigh far too much. At the same time, grip can be hard to find, meaning that understeer and spinouts are pretty common early on. As the game progresses, handling can improve moderately with some cars, even with full upgrades, and other cars are basically perfect from the time you buy them. This issue is one of consistency, and I figure all of the cars in the game that are for sale are there because over the years, their real counterparts have become known for their performance, handling, and fun. It's just weird to see that some cars become genuinely unfun or boring to drive because the upgrades do very little for them. On the topic of upgrades, the upgrade system is decent but strange. Some upgrades aren't just locked behind how much money you have, but also what level you are. In other types of games, like maybe Elden Ring, I can see the use of a skill or a weapon being locked behind level, because a character needs to be strong enough or smart enough to use it. Racing games are different. You don't need to know more or be stronger to buy a new part. You just need to be good at racing games. Basically, as long as you know how to go fast without crashing, you shouldn't need to be a certain level to buy an upgrade. Beside that, the upgrades can become weirdly expensive at times, meaning you can get caught in a rut where you don't really have enough money to upgrade your car, and also not enough to sell the car and buy one that's good enough to cover the skill difference from race to race. This means that you kind of have to spend an annoying amount of time doing delivery missions, which kind of takes away from the excitement of doing the crew races, because you just spent an hour messing around with deliveries just to feel a slight difference in how your car actually feels during the crew race. The economy itself can also get annoying at times. The early game race is not really paying enough to warrant the use of boosters like racing gas or racing tires, but obviously this is alleviated with time and effort. It's not too bad if you're good at racing games, or if you just spend most of your time in game doing delivery missions. Now that I've mentioned the delivery missions a couple of times, let me say that they get boring quickly. The parts delivery missions are the worst. Just you driving around town in a slow, shitty truck stopping at different locations to drop off boxes. The car deliveries are better just because they let you mess around with cars that you don't own yet. But both cars and parts delivery missions give you so much time that there's practically no reason to actually try unless you just want to drive fast for fun. When looking back at the main races, they can get really repetitive and boring because of reused tracks, and the NPC racers can completely drain them of any fun they were worth anyway. These racers are unharmable, and any impact you have with them basically ruins the race unless you can stop yourself from spinning or you got good recoveries. In both of these cases, you still have to have a car fast enough to catch back up with the pack before the end of the race. Getting to customization, although you have plenty of options, there are some body kit and customization options that are locked behind an expansion pack. I can understand locking cars behind an expansion, but customization options for cars that are part of the original game being locked seems like a bit of a stretch. On to some more subjective stuff, in my opinion, the radio feature sucks. This isn't a knock against the feature as a whole because other games make better use of it, but CarX Street makes it feel like the same few songs constantly play when there are 20 different songs on the radio. They get old. The plot is nothing to write home about either. Obviously in a racing game, the plot usually takes a backseat to the actual gameplay, but for a game inspired by Need for Speed titles like Unbound and Heat, there's no allure in escaping the police and no interesting rivals with dramatic commentary. The intro is as bland as you can get it. You land in a new city where you already have connections and you get introduced to a gimmick that allows you to get your name out there and climb the ranks of some local scene or group. The only characters in the intro are voiced by AI, which is obviously done as a cost-cutting measure, but it comes off as cheap and clunky. The main gimmick, a phone app that connects you to a web of racers across the city, just seems silly. At least in Forza Horizon, the Horizon Festival is kind of believable, even if the setting and locations can get a little dumb. In CarX Street, who really needs a dedicated app just to get around races in one single city? Finally, it's really easy to tell that the aesthetics and graphics are really influenced by newer NFS titles like Unbound and Heat, except they didn't really figure out what the best way to use it would be. In NFS Unbound, 2D graphics are used to supplement an overall art style that has its motif in bright 3D patterns and contrasts that are animated in ways that make them look two-dimensional. In NFS Heat, the motif is themed around the game's location, a fictional representation of Miami, making use of bright neons on dark backgrounds all across the game. In CarX Street, they kinda just threw both of these elements in without creating a motif that actually gets carried across the whole game, meaning that there are times when the visuals get boring and bland because you know that they're supposed to be a copy of another game and not an independent product that was just inspired. If you want to look at another game by a small dev group that actually does the whole inspiration thing well, you might as well look at Night Runners, a game that's heavily inspired by titles like Need for Speed and Tokyo Extreme Racer, as well as the Juiced series. This game makes really great use of its inspirations, setting up an environment that carries the grittiness and allure of both Juiced and Need for Speed games, with the gameplay of Tokyo Extreme Racer and the classic and plentiful customization of NFS games like Carbon or Underground. All of this is done under the effect of dated graphics and old visuals while also still having the full effect of speed and power in how the cars feel and look. Also, I actually like the songs on the radio because they sound good, and the radio feature actually shuffles the songs well. Granted, I understand that Night Runners is still in a beta phase, so it's weird to compare it to CarX Street, a game that's essentially full and has just come out. And now we arrive at the good stuff. Let's start with the map. The map is massive, just huge enough to get lost in and have fun with, but also fleshed out and planned well, so it's never really a chore to drive from one end of it to the other. There are plenty of different areas that allow for different kinds of driving, and it kinda does help you get better at rounding different kinds of corners. Also, when you open the map itself, you notice that it's a 3D object that you can zoom into and see more detailed roads. This is cool, and it makes me very happy. In terms of actual gameplay, there are plenty of races and there's always a way to make money when you need it, even if it can get a little tiring. Within the game, there's a total of 13 crews that you can enter, with different class requirements for each. Per crew, there are 15 to 19 races, and then you get to do elite club races, which pay more than the standard crew races and also give you the premium in-game currency as opposed to just money. As far as I know, the car and parts delivery missions go on forever, and they range greatly in pay, so you can always count on a decent boost when you're moderately far into the game and need money quickly. There's also leaderboard events that have you setting either a high score for drifting or a personal best in a time attack, as well as single sprint races where the goal is to beat a certain time with as little damage as possible. And over to customization, I can really say that the customization in this game is great. You're spoiled for choice in terms of wheel options, you can pick practically whatever color you want, and every car has its own body kit options as well as interior accessory choices. Although there isn't a way to add liveries yet like in CarX Drift Racing, apparently it's due to come in an update soon. Weird side note about body kits though, I have the 69 Charger in game, and there's an option to have a big root supercharger sticking through the hood. The thing is, there isn't any effect on performance from this, and there isn't an option at all to add a supercharger. I know that the supercharger hood for the 69 is there as a nod to Fast and Furious, and that the Charger in that movie also had a fake supercharger, but I really hope they add a real supercharger into the game at some point. Also, the graphics in this game are gorgeous. All of the natural elements are really colorful, and the weather looks great in-game. The day and night cycles look really nice, and the night really does make everything super dark. Everything is really detailed, from the cars to the road to the grass that it sits next to. It is as good as a racing game can look without a bunch of visual effects, in my opinion. Finally, the game comes with its own interface and controls for racing wheels. Although I don't know how many wheels the game can be paired with, it was a breath of fresh air to see that all I had to do with my Logitech wheel was plug it in and change the settings for the pedals to non-inverted. No setup wizard, no having to mess around with it until the settings felt right, just plug and play. So then what are we left with? Well, honestly, I can't really say this game is terrible or that it's a complete bore to play because there's definitely some fun to be had. What I can say is that the expectations were set really high for this game, with delays that essentially told us that the devs were trying as hard as possible and using as much extra time as they needed to deliver a complete and great game, but that ultimately it just doesn't live up to these expectations. If this were a mobile-only release, then I wouldn't be so critical, just based on the nature of what you can fit in a mobile game. The thing is, this is a full-scale release that was years in the making, and they didn't even bother trying to make a plot worth caring about, or a fully working economy that allows for smooth gameplay. The issues with AI traffic and racers can honestly get frustrating. I have genuinely lost count of the amount of times that I've gotten absolutely pounded out by the AI and had to restart a race because I got stuck on a wall or a dumpster or something. The tuning really should get an overhaul. It just needs more options as well as more effect on the actual handling and performance of the car you drive. Although I honestly don't think that the good can outweigh the bad in this game, I do honestly think that it has a lot of potential. The devs really could fix most of the issues with a couple of updates. I really didn't expect this game to be some sort of competitor for games like Assetto Corsa, but at the same time, I don't think I've been as excited for a racing game release as I have for this one. Even if I am pretty disappointed by what I got, I know I'm not giving up on this game. I will wait for it to improve because I genuinely think the devs care about the game. By the way, if you're wondering why I haven't talked about the multiplayer, it's because it doesn't let me join online for some reason. It just says connection failed, and I think it's a bug. But that's about it for me, and if you stuck around till now, I really do appreciate you. I'll see you in the next one, I guess.